Hey, it's Mark here with Mark's Astro Journey. Getting ready to image the comet that they're saying only comes around about every 50,000 years, and depending on what happens to it, might not ever return. Anyways, 50,000 years from now, we may not be around. So I'm really excited to try to image the comet, and I'm going to go through capturing the images as well as processing the images. You're going to see, if you've not done this before, that it's a little challenging to stack the images because the comet itself is on its own trajectory. Throughout the imaging session, it's not going to stay in the same relative position to the other objects or deep sky objects like the stars in your field of view. So I'm going to talk about how I went through that process, and maybe it'll be helpful to others. If you're like a seasoned pro or an expert and you have really great suggestions on how to do this in a much easier or expeditious way, please leave your comments so that others can learn from your valuable experience. So let's get started with our imaging session. And I didn't mention the comet's name because I have a hard time actually just remembering what it is. It's C/2022 E3 ZTF. So let's get started. So the first step is navigating to the comet in the sky, or slewing to the comet with the telescope mount. And we can use apps like SkyGuide, and it shows the current coordinates of a given target in the sky. Another option is to use one of the common websites that gives details about targets like the Sky Live, and it'll give you the right ascension and declination of the comet. And then we can use this dialog in Stellarium once we've connected to our telescope, and we can enter those coordinates, and then we can slew to those coordinates. Of course, you could also just directly enter the right ascension and declination into your hand controller and slew to the target that way. So before slewing here, I had also done a previous imaging session, so my telescope mount was already polar aligned, and I did a 1-star alignment, and then I had also done some plate solving on other targets, so the alignment of my telescope was already in pretty decent shape. And so after slewing, we can see the comet pretty much in the center of our field of view. So I've read and heard that some people can actually set their guiding to use the comet as their guide target. But I have this iOptron iGuider mini guider. It's a 30 millimeter diameter and 120 millimeter focal length, and you can't really discern what target is inside PHT guiding. It'd be really difficult to distinguish between a comet and the stars around it. So I'll start looping and auto select a star and get the guiding started, and it'll be based off of multi-star guiding, and so we'll be guiding on stars and not the comet itself. So we'll let this guiding get started to build up something on the graph, and then in SharpCap, looks like our histogram looks pretty decent, although the gain's a little high, so we might need to bring the gain down a little bit. Just checking back in on the guiding, it's looking pretty good. So I reduced the gain a little, and we'll see if the histogram looks a little better, and I think it will. Yep, that looks good. So I'm going to go with this gain and this 60-second exposure time. And one check-in on the guiding again, and it's looking good. So now I'm going to get my target name entered here in SharpCap and kick off an imaging session. The Astrospheric app indicated that clouds are going to move in about an hour, so I'm only going to go with an hour-long imaging session. Lately, the weather here has just been all clouds. It'll clear up some during the day, but almost every night has been cloudy. So this is one of the few nights where I've had any clear skies at all, but it's not going to last. So hopefully I'll get clear skies for at least 1 hour. So just doing a check-in here after about 30 minutes, and here's what things are looking like in SharpCap, and we'll take a peek at PHT2 guiding, and this is also looking good as well. So we'll check back in here in another 30 minutes. We should be wrapping up. So the capture completed, and just in time, the high clouds moved in, and we can see that reflected here in the guiding where the clouds are interfering with the visibility of the stars. So finished capturing my darks. I'm going to capture some flat frames now. I removed the end cap off the telescope and put on my light panel. So we'll get the exposure and gain adjusted so we can get a good histogram for capturing our flats. So I like the look of the histogram with those adjustments. So we'll start capturing our flats. We'll go with 200. I'll show what it does, but I'll speed this up really fast. So here it's wrapping up. Last couple frames, flat frames. So normally we would stack all of our images, and this allows us to take advantage of all the data that was captured in the different frames. But you can see here why we cannot stack in the normal way. The comet is on its own trajectory. Normally, everything in the image stays the same spacing in relation to each other. So if you have stars, nebula, whatever those objects are that are deep sky, usually there's no apparent movement throughout your imaging session between the objects within your field of view. In this case, that isn't true. You can see the first frame that was captured, that where the comet's position is at. And then if you look towards the end of the imaging session, about an hour later, the 58th frame, it's moved quite a bit in relation to the other deep sky objects. So this means that with comets, from what I understand, there may be some experts that have some better ways to do this, but we have to separate our comet from the background or the stars and do our stacking separately. So that's what I plan to do. I don't think I captured any one frame that was such an excellent frame with such excellent quality that I wouldn't need to do any stacking. So since I want to do stacking on the comet, primarily I'm going to stack stars as well separately. I'll have to separate those. So next let's talk about how would we separate those. So inside of Astropixel processor, there's this tools section, and one of the options is star reducer. If we click on that, it asks us to choose the file. So if we choose a file, we can then attempt to do this star removal using this option, remove stars. It does have some settings here that you can use to try to control either the complete removal or when you're doing correction. And so I first try it without changing any of those settings usually. Sometimes it'll remove all of them, sometimes one or two will remain. So if one or two remain and you tweak these settings in here, and you can't seem to get a star to remove, the option that leaves you with is taking this image over into something like GIMP. There's a clone tool inside GIMP. I imagine Photoshop has something similar. And what that clone tool lets you do is take a selector, copy the background that's near what you want to remove, and basically you clone over top of the star to get it out of your image. And so like in this case, if you're just left with one star left, or maybe there's only two, and you tweak these settings and you can't get it to remove all of them, then you can just, a quick touch up in GIMP or Photoshop to remove that one remaining star. The issue that I saw doing this is this comet in the captured image is not a lot bigger than some of the stars. It's slightly bigger, slightly brighter, has that halo around it. But I think that messes with this a little bit. It's different than if you were trying to do like remove all the stars where there's like a nebula or a galaxy. But I don't know. I mean, you'd have to see by experimentation if you're using Astropixel processor or if you use Photoshop. There's a plugin for Photoshop. It's something like Star Terminator. I can't remember the name, and it actually has a similar function where it'll remove all the stars. So that's the approach I'm taking because this is the tool I'm using. I don't have Photoshop, and the licensing for Photoshop is pretty expensive in my opinion. Like if I had to pay $20, $30 or whatever a month to get all that set of tools, it's a lot of money over a year and then year after year. So trying to go with a more economical option, but maybe there are better tools. Maybe someone who uses Photoshop would say that plugin is like really awesome and you don't have to deal with anything like a leftover star. And so once you do the star removal, what you can do is click on save. And what this does, so this doesn't affect the original image. You're going to create another image that is basically a FITS file, or if you prefer and you want to switch that over to some other type of image. It depends on what you're going to be doing, how you plan on taking the image with just the comet and doing further processing to it, what the most ideal format is for that software. FITS might work for you, or you may find that you have to switch to TIFF when you save it, because the stacking, it's interesting to try to stack a comet, but anyways, I ended up going with a TIFF because I was doing my stacking in Link EOS. That's LYNKEOS. That's a software that will run on iMac. And so anyways, you would save your file from here and you would have to do this to each of your frames to remove the stars. So when we used Astropixel processor to remove the stars so that we could deal with images that have the comet alone, sometimes there might be a star or two that don't get removed by that utility. So then we have to to actually get rid of those stars with something like GIMP or another tool, Photoshop, whatever your tool of choice is. And so I'm just going to show in GIMP something you can do. You can see here that I was trying to get to the image with just the comet and one star remained. So I'm going to zoom in to 100%. By zooming in, we can do a much more precise touch-up to remove the star. And so you can see it here. And there's this cloning option inside GIMP. If you hover over these tools up here, you can see the different tools that exist. And we're looking for the one that's a clone tool. So there's the eraser, there's the clone tool. If we choose this tool, and I'm going to leave it as the default option, I'm not choosing perspective or healing in this case. All I'm going to do is use the clone, and what I'm going to do by doing that, and I think I want to change the size of the brush because that's a really large brush. So I'll take the brush size down. So don't have to affect such a large area in the image. So now you can see the brush size. So all we really want to do is this star didn't get removed. We just want to remove it from the image, and you can see the coloring or the data that's captured around the star. So if we just click, use the control key and click near it, you can see that it chooses the region where we're going to clone. And so I just take the brush and go over that star. And now this similar contents of data that was captured here has been placed over top of where the star is at. So that we can remove the star from the image. And so now I can zoom out. And you can see the cursor still there, where I chose a region to clone from. But you can see that the star is now gone. So we would have to do this for any images where the star removal utility we used didn't remove all the stars because, again, we want to stack all the comet capture. And we can't do that with the stars included because the stars are going to be in a different position as the comet progresses across the sky. The stars will not stay in the same relative position to the comet. So that's why we're removing the stars, all the stars from the image where we're going to process just the comet itself. And then, of course, we would save this. You can use the export as and save it out as a TIFF or whatever format you prefer to work with. And that way we can take all of our comet alone images and process those to get the most data out of what we captured. Now that we have our images with the comet isolated from the rest of the objects like the stars in the background, we want to process those, stack them, and try to get the most data out of the information we captured about the comet itself. I found that this didn't work very well in AutoStacker. I also tried it in Astropixel Processor. Maybe there's some technique to do it in those tools and I just am not aware of how to get it to work. So I'm going to try that in Link EOS now. So I usually reduce the zoom so I can see the target we're trying to do things like alignment on, because we have to choose the region that we're going to align or choose the region that we're going to stack. So first we'll kick off the alignment. I'll speed up this alignment so we don't have to wait through the normal amount of time it takes to complete it. And we'll also run the analyze to evaluate the quality. And now we'll stack our images, and again I'll speed this up. I'm not going to use a lot of the post-processing features in Link EOS. I'm just going to adjust the black point, white point, and gamma correction, and then save the image. So now here in GIMP, I'm going to take the image that was stacked in Link EOS of the comet alone and try to bring out a little bit more of the data with some minor adjustments. After zooming in, I'm going to make a few adjustments to bring out the data that was captured, such as black point, contrast, exposure, and the green color. And of course, I'll also export this to a couple different formats. And here's a quick look at the resulting refined image. So now that we have our comet isolated from the stars and stacked, we're going to do the reverse. We're going to subtract the comet from the image, the full image, so that we get the image with just the stars, so that we can stack the set of images that have just the stars without the comet included. So after adding the image, I'm going to add a new layer. And then what I'm going to do is open the image that has the comet alone. It's the same frame, so you have to make sure you have the same frame. So you can see here I'm choosing frame 19. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything in this frame that just has the comet, copy it, switch back to the other full image and the layer that I added, and paste the contents of the comet alone. And then I'm going to choose this floating selection, this pasted layer, and I'm going to click on that anchor icon. At the bottom right, there's an icon there to anchor. And now that becomes part of that layer that I had added. And now I'm going to use the option here for subtract on that layer. And what happens is the comet gets subtracted from the other image, and I have just the background with just the stars. And so now I can export that image, and I have the full image minus the comet. And again, this is going to allow us to stack all the images that just have the stars. And of course, we export this to the format that we like to work with in our other processing software so that we can do our stacking and processing. And we'd have to do this for each of the frames where we want to retain the full image minus the comet. One thing I did is I isolated the best frames, reviewing like the quality of the stars. And I'm just going to do this process for those, not all 59. If I would have had better weather, could have done a longer imaging session, I could have continued until the comet went out of the field of view. That would have allowed me to have captured just the stars alone. It would have eliminated the second part of this where I had to subtract the comet from the stars so that I could stack just the stars. So now in Astropixel processor, I'm going to take the images that have just the stars without the comet included and do the process of analyzing, calibrating, stacking all of those frames to produce the final image that has just the stars. And then after that, of course, we'll have to combine that with the stacked image that has the comet. So we'll also load up our dark frames. And for calibration, we'll also load up our flats. And lastly, our bias frames. I'm going to set the sorting to be by quality, and I'm going to kick off the analyze process, which will do the calibration and evaluation of the quality of the frames. And I'll speed this up and just show a little bit of it getting started. So the analyze phase is completed. I'm going to sort based upon the quality again, take a look at the results, and then I'm going to kick off the integrate process. This isn't going to take very long, so we'll just let it run to completion. So I'm going to make a few adjustments here to black point and gamma correction and saturation, and then I'll save the image, the stacked image of the stars without the comet. I usually like to at least save to TIFF and JPEG. You may have your own preferences. Next, it's time to combine our two images. So now that we have our comet isolated from the stars stacked and our stars isolated from the comet stacked, it's time to combine those two images. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to open just the stack of the stars, and I'm going to add a new layer. And then I'm going to open the comet stack. And now I'm going to select all, copy that, and then I'm going to switch back to this image and still have this layer selected that I had added, and I'm going to do a paste. One thing I want to do is see this floating selection. I want to anchor that, and so I'm going to click on this option, anchor the floating layer. Now it took the contents I had pasted and those became part of this layer. The other thing I want to do is I want to change the mode of this layer to addition. One other thing is the position of this layer. What I want to do now is I want to move that. There is no exact one position that would be correct. The reason I say that is the comet, when I started the imaging session, started in about this general area down here, and its trajectory took it upwards. So there's no one place when creating the final image where I could, put the comet to be exactly in the same spot it was during the imaging session. But I do know that it was more or less, if you center the image, it started out in this general area above these stars right here. And so my thought is to place the comet kind of to the lower than center and left of center to give it, a representation somewhere in that area right there of kind of where it was at one point in the trajectory during the imaging session. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this. And I went through an exercise on this prior to recording the video. So I'm going to reuse the names in my prior exercise where I was just stepping through the steps. So I'm going to save that, replace that. And notice I'm not saving layers. I want to see the effect of combining the layers, not the individual layers still saved in the file. The next thing I want to do is adjust the exposure, because when processing the Comet stack separately, I tend to get a little bit more of a blue hue. So I'm going to increase the black level just enough to make it a little more natural. I'm also going to export that. I'm going to use the name of the second file I'd used in my exercise when I stepped through these steps without recording, and replace that. And then for both images, I'm going to use the crop tool, crop them and export them. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I found it an interesting learning experience to try to not only image a comet, locate it, and then process and stack the image afterwards. So I guess I'll leave that up to you. Was it worth the time and effort? I felt like it was quite a bit more effort than the normal processing of any other deep sky object that I've done before. I imagine there's somebody, like I said earlier, who's watching this, who's like a seasoned pro, they're an expert, and they know like ways to do this that are, techniques that would make it faster or make it easier. I think the one thing that I wish I could have done, and I would have had the opportunity, is to have like a 4 or 5 hour, 6 hour window to do the imaging session. And then the comet could have went out of the field of view at some point, like let's say after the first 2 or 3 hours. And then that last hour or two, I could have captured the set of stars or the set of deep sky objects that were in that field of view without the comet. What that would have allowed me to have done is that second part of the process that I went through, where I had to process the stars with the comet removed. I wouldn't have had to done the step of subtracting the comet from the full image with the stars, because I would have been able to have captured frames that only had the stars. So maybe in a future time, I'll be able to do imaging of a comet and the imaging session that way. It doesn't look like there's going to be any more good weather to image this comet. Maybe so, but right now the weather forecast is just showing clouds, almost every night. Anyways, leave me any comments or suggestions you have down below. If you found this video interesting and you thought the equipment might be something you'd be interested in or want to learn more about, you might want to check out this video where I did a product unboxing and brief review of the iOptron GEM28 Mount. Clear skies.